everybody. Welcome to this YouTube video. Today is special for a lot of reasons. It's not every time you get to do a video with two of your most special people in the world. But that is that day for me. So we're shooting live from Michigan, Grand Rapids, and I have the joy and the privilege of shooting this video with number one, my wife and sweetheart, Mildred Kingsley Okonkwo, the wife of my youth, and my mentor, Dr. Emerson Eggrichs.
Thank you. Thank you.
So we're live here in Michigan, Grand Rapids, and this is a special edition. All right, but before we start, please don't forget to subscribe, like, share, do all the things you need to do. Follow our channels. They're always useful stuff that will be a blessing to you in the channel. So I have Pastor Mildred and Dr. Emerson, and today is special because we're number one. We're talking about Dr. Emerson and Dr. Sarah just celebrated 50 years of marriage. All right, and before he even speaks, interestingly, we also found out that we have the same wedding anniversary, September 3rd. We have the same wedding anniversary. So this is special for us.
Yeah,
so
very.
we're seeing our future.
Amen.
You know, so
50 years.
50
so
years.
You guys realize that some of you are not 50.
Yes, I mean, love for watching enough 50
Lots
years.
of you are not 50. In fact, some of you are like 20.
Yeah.
So this is he's been married longer than
You've been alive
longer
twice.
than-
Twice
yes,
over.
2 times over. So I believe that today is going to be special because there's so much that we can learn, and I'm so glad that he graciously agreed to do this with us because
Yeah.
I have questions. I have so many
Yeah.
questions. So many. So can I start?
Yes.
Because I want to have just how did you guys meet?
Good question. It was at Wheaton College, which is a Christian liberal arts school in Chicago area, and I had just come to Christ 2 years before at a military school. I saw a Billy Graham film called For Pete's Sake, and the invitation was given. It was in Liberty Theater in Mexico, Missouri, and I went forward and asked Christ into my life. I was thinking about West Point, which is one of our major military academies, but met with my congressman about that, the president of the military school. But when I came to Christ, I found out that Billy Graham had gone to Wheaton. I really didn't know too much about the Christian faith. I didn't know too much about that culture, but when I found out that he went there, I applied. And my sophomore year, Sarah had applied, and she was now a freshman, and she was spoken of very highly about from her friends, and I obviously began to think about, hey, is there someone here that I could fall in love with and marry? And she was the person I set my sights on, and began to date her, and I proposed to her relatively soon, and we were married about a year later, and so it was just one of those relationships that we just felt the Lord led us together, and we're very grateful for that. And I think we've given a lot of thought to relationships. We were even thinking about relationships prior to meeting each other, and I think that contributes, to this 50 years, which we might address as well, which is a challenge I extend to singles, to be thinking about what makes for successful relationships. And even if we've got unsuccessful relationships, there was like over 20 divorces in Sarah's extended family. I mean, it's epidemic. And so, but we then thought, well, what do we want to avoid doing? And giving thought to that, we're not predestined to misery because our parents struggled or our in-laws of some sort. So we can address a little bit about that. But anyway, that's how we met, and I proposed. And I wasn't planning on proposing, and it kind of just came out of me. I said it kind of like John the Baptist out of the desert. It just, will you marry me? I mean, I hadn't really planned. It just kind of, whoa. And I said, I can't believe I just said that. She said, well, you can take it back. I said, I don't want to take it back.
So you didn't have a ring or anything?
No,
You didn't go on one
no.
knee,
It was just, I did not plan. It just, we look back on that, and it was in 1972 maybe. And so, the idea of proposals as they do now on Instagram and all that stuff. I mean, but anyway, that's how it went down for us.
And you don't regret it?
No, not at all.
So was there one quality or something? Was there what was so special about her?
Yeah, because Don't finish it, because I was gonna say, because we've met Dr. Sarah, and she's such an amazing person. I don't know if he knows. So that's why we're trying to
50
ask.
years.
That's why I'm trying to ask. So what if he knows what makes her special? So go ahead. I don't know if he knows. We know.
Yes.
So we go ahead.
Okay. So I was thinking, what was it about her? That you just knew,
Right.
or did you just know? Like,
Well, I think there's two levels. I mean, there's that subjective element, but I think there's also, we were at Wheaton, so we knew that people love the Lord. Marrying in the Lord. Paul talks about that character qualities are important. But she had many character qualities, but I do remember thinking she was real in her skin. She was comfortable in her skin. There wasn't pretense. I mean, there were other girls that I would interact with, and I wasn't judging them, but I always felt they weren't comfortable. They weren't free. Sarah was just free. And that's been true for 50 years. Whether you're a billionaire or whether you're a street person, she just doesn't. It doesn't matter to her. She's just herself, and she enjoys the person in front of her. And so I think that sense of authenticity was very attractive to me. And she's sanguine. She's outgoing. She's expressive, and life is exciting. And so there were many qualities that attracted me.
50 years. How does that feel? Because we are just 18 years. So as in 50 years, is it like, did it go by real quick? How does it feel?
Well, I think to that point, I think there is this sense of, it seems like we just got married yesterday. We've talked about our honeymoon. It seemed like just yesterday, when we had these scenes, when we were all excited and everything. It was just yesterday. I mean, people say the days go by slowly, but the years go by quickly, and it is true. There is, but yeah, you begin to realize the runway's getting shorter, but you also are grateful for the experiences and the wisdom that you receive over those years. And in some ways, we feel we're in our best season now, we think, to serve and contribute to people. But yeah, I mean, you have to pinch yourself. How can this be? And particularly when we have peers. I had a good buddy from the 70s, went to seminary with him and ministered. He was the chaplain of the Yankees for many years, lived in Manhattan, had a street ministry as well as a Wall Street ministry, B.J. Weber. I spoke at his memorial. They had about 600 leaders from New York there, and but he died at age 75, my good friend. And you as you get older, you realize all your friends begin now to die, and that becomes a new season, and those are real emotions. I just did 3 funerals here in the last several months of people that were very close to me, and that, I think, becomes a reality. But the 50 years of marriage, I mean, people say you never feel old until you lose your health. And so when you feel healthy, I still feel like I'm 29 inside. You feel energetic, and she's, perpetual motion. I call it PM. She's just, and she keeps going. And but yeah, it went by very quickly. And you come to it. We lay in bed at night thinking, one of us is going to die first, and the life is not going to continue on. And are we faithful to the end? Will we be faithful to the end? We believe we will be. Are we going to be fulfilling the call of Christ in our life in these next maybe 10, 15, 20 years? So we pray, I think, a little bit differently than we did when we were in our 20s. But, in some ways, we're just more excited now than ever. And you suddenly pinch yourself, 50 years, it's quite a time period. It was our 25th, maybe it was maybe the 30th anniversary. We were in Manhattan, New York. I was seeing BJ and Sheila there, and I needed a cell phone. And we went into the cell phone room, and we were just having a good time, hugging on each other, just having a good time, right? And when we bought this cell phone, the female behind the counter thought we were, lovers who were perhaps having an affair. That's what she was used to. And she said, did you just meet here in the last 7 months? I said, no, we've been married for 30 years. Literally, this woman almost got nauseous. She said, I've never known anybody to live 30 years. She said, you're lying to me. I said, no, she literally in Manhattan, New York, had never encountered anybody married for 30 years. We've told that story. She was in shock, disbelief. She knew of nobody who remained married to each other. Isn't that sad? Our hearts broke for her, but we were a novelty to her. We were an anomaly. Aliens.
Okay, can I quickly take you back to the beginning? You talked about your honeymoon. So what were the first couple of years like, your early years in marriage? What were they like? Because I hear sometimes people say first year is always the toughest. Was that your experience? Was it easy?
Well, there was a lot of joy. I do remember a lot of joy because, there are a lot of things that Sarah talks about the fact that we could play house. She always wanted to have, the home and the nesting and the fixing the meals. And so there was a lot of social joy. We would have friends over and so on and so forth. But I remember thinking, particularly we talked about the PMS, the pre-murder syndrome, we call it. Once a month it seemed like she was very upset with me. And I wasn't tracking with this, and I was feeling like it was horrible, and I can remember beginning to try to figure out, wait a minute, what's happening here? And then having self-doubt, am I not the kind of man that I should be in relationship to her? And then she would apologize and feel horrible, and then everything was okay, and then this happened again. And I talked to people about, you have to make these adjustments, and you don't pass judgment on each other, you serve each other. But I can remember being confused and not really discerning, but that I allowed to motivate me to discern and figure out and ask questions and be discerning of these dynamics, which then has helped me. Instead of getting defensive and reacting, I always tried to lean into it and learn what's going on. What did I do to contribute to her negative reaction? Because I blame myself, but then she would apologize, and it wasn't me, it was her, and I got confused. I never quite knew where to assign blame, and I didn't want to blame her. But so anyway, I remember moments of confusion, but also journaling and trying to figure out, praying, and we also made a commitment that we were not going to experience what my parents had experienced, or the parents, her parents, and that whole extended family. So we were committed, to figuring out these relationships and reminding ourselves of certain things over the years that I've developed, like we both have goodwill. We don't like each other right now, but we both have goodwill. Neither one of us have ill will toward each other. We have an honest difference of opinion here, and we're going to have to address this. So, but I don't know if I'm scratching where you're itching right now, if that's the question you're asking, or...
Yeah, kind of. Like I said, most people say the first couple of years are tough.
Yes.
But so you
Well,
kind of have answered that.
They are, yes. Yes, I agree with that. Because people are trying to, particularly if they married later in life, then they've got these habits, and that's why people have to make an adjustment to each other. It's the best of times, the worst of times. But the challenge is not to be freaked out by those tensions. I think some people have this idea, if we love each other, we won't have any conflicts. And that's not biblical, in that Paul says in 1 Corinthians 7:28, if you marry, you've not sinned, but you will have trouble. And he's referencing back to verse 4, where the husband does not have authority over his own body, but the wife does. And the wife does not have authority over her own body, but the husband does. And he's referencing sexual intimacy, and that each have final say in the bedroom. Well, if you both have final say, who makes the decision? And I remember praying about it, and I said, Lord, is that why there's trouble? Yes. And so there's going to be honest differences of opinion, different preferences. And some people freak out because they shouldn't be having these heated fellowship moments. They shouldn't be having these special challenges. And part of my campaign is to help people relax and roll with these. This does not mean you made a mistake. It doesn't mean that you're not doing this relationship well. And so in those first 3 years where there's some difficulties, just relax. It's okay. And don't be comparing yourself to people out there that you think have this perfect relationship. Trust me, I've been on the backside of all those relationships, and it's not perfect. And if they do have a good relationship, it's because they've learned what I'm saying.
Yes. Yeah. So would you say that the dynamics of your marriage changed when kids came?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. There was a lot of joy. Sarah was always anticipating being a mother, and I was anticipating being a father. I later did my PhD dissertation on effective fathering. So I think we had a lot of joy of that. But yeah, you suddenly now realize we're responsible for this little human being. Yeah. And then you begin to think you're going to be perfect parents, and then you soon learn that they are moral, spiritual beings who make their own decisions. And you have these moments, particularly when our kids were in the teenage years, the self-doubt is parenting. And one night, on a Friday night, all 3 kids, Jonathan, David, and Joy, were in their teens, and they were all out somewhere. And they had all had attitudes, that day, and they were just, not at all the perfect pastor's kids, right? And so Sarah and I are now in the living room by ourselves, and Sarah said, "What should we do?" And I said, "I don't know." She said, "Well, you did your dissertation on effective fathering." So, I mean, we had those moments of, how do we proceed? And one of the things that I always found comfort in is saying, look, the Lord knows. Let's just pray about it. Let's give it to Him. I don't have an answer right now, but let's just give it over to the Lord. And that was always part of my default, but it's also a very beautiful thing to do, and it was a release to both of us. It gave confidence as I came under the umbrella of Christ, that as she saw me trusting Christ, she then felt a greater freedom to trust me. And I learned that early on, and I was genuine in that. I wasn't being superficial in that. And then asking the Lord to help us, because at the end of the day, you can't control the outcomes in your children. Early on you can, but you can tell them to say thank you, but you cannot coerce them to be grateful. And so there is a limitation that we have. And so how do we appeal to our children? How do we coach them, particularly as they move in those teenage years? And those can be challenging years. And I remember a woman, a mother, who did a stand-up comedy act because somebody told her to do it because she was hilarious just as a friend. And somebody said, "You need to tell some of these stories." And one of the stories she tells is when her son, she said, she was from Brooklyn, she said, "My son was in his teenage years, and he had an attitude. And he was whining. And he said, if you don't love me, why'd you have me? If you don't love me, why'd you have me?" She said, "We didn't know it was going to be you."
Oh, that's good. Okay.
But have there been some hard years or hard seasons, and have there been some high seasons?
Yes.
So can you share a bit?
Well, I think, one of the high seasons right now, our children are adults. Jonathan, he's a clinical psychologist, perhaps because of all the issues I gave him to resolve them. But he works for Love and Respect 3 days a week, and then he's got his Love and Respect counseling. David, our son, is a videographer, has a great videography company, does a lot of things for Chipotle national firms. I mean, he's out and about doing a lot of videography. And then Joy has her own publishing agency, and she's in France. So we're very grateful that on this back end. You just plod. You be the adult in the room. You're Christ-centered. You're principle-driven. There are principles that Sarah and I just committed to, not knowing what the results might be.
Yes.
And there were years that the kids would all talk about their struggles. I mean, we are sinners. We have problems. And I think back on those teenage years where, we wondered, were we doing the best? I mean, at one point David said to us, our middle son, you just teach these things because Dad's a pastor. And Sarah said, David, we would be this way even if he wasn't in the ministry. This is what we believe, So there was that pushback, and they were wondering about, our effectiveness as parents. But now things come full circle. So one of the things we say to parents, just stay the course. Just stay the course. Be the real deal. Be the real deal. And that means confessing at times where we yelled or screamed, and I'm wrong. I was wrong. I lost control. I'm wrong. But I think those parenting seasons were perhaps our low times because you want the best for your kids. You're trying to influence them, but they're not always receptive. They've got to make their own mistakes. So I think those were challenges. But then as they've aged now, and now they're friends, they're adult friends, and we interact on that level. And I think they are some of our greatest supporters. In fact, I wrote a book, Love and Respect in the Family. And David, who had the greatest struggle with my parenting, is the one that gives that book out to his friends like candy. Dad, they don't know how to parent. I said, well, you told me I didn't know how to parent. So, there are many highs and many lows. But I think the key is for us to be the real deal as best we can. And I've looked at parents who are very effective with their children in my church through the years. And I look back on some of those kids that were in church on Sunday night. We had Sunday morning, Sunday night. They were just perfect kids. But then when they moved into their late teens, they went off rail. And that's because the parents were not together. They appeared to be together, but they weren't. Then I started looking at those kids that really turned out well. And I noticed, particularly with the fathers, they might be in the after the church service, the dads were standing around talking about the sermon. Said, oh man, God convicted me today. The kids are standing there watching. He's just into himself thinking, man, I got to deal with this in my life. I never saw that in the scripture before. Wow, man, am I under conviction? And I began to realize this humble transparency. And those kids are watching that, and they just see the real deal. I just attended a funeral of one of my good friends. He helped me with my academics. He was a professor. He was 93, having a devotional every morning. The day before he died, they showed him in his wheelchair at the desk, he was journaling from his devotional. Within 12 hours, he was dead. But he modeled that. His son's in the ministry today. He was just always in the Word himself as a dad, and trying to deal with what Christ wanted him to deal with. And that was contagious. And so, it's that whole idea, when we sneeze, our kids need to get the disease.
So I was thinking again, so I know you had years when you were pastoring.
Yes.
When you were pastor. And I know that I've heard some pastors complaining about how, the ministry affected their marriage.
Yes.
Sometimes not positively. The stress of ministry. How were you able to navigate that season of your life?
Well, I was on a staff of a church in California where the elders at that church, was a mega church, who believed in me. And so when this church in East Lansing, Michigan opened up, that I was going to come out and candidate, and they were serious about me, that church flew 2 elders out from California to Trinity Church in East Lansing to negotiate the philosophy ministry, my salary. They negotiated everything because they said, we want to protect him from Trinity, but we want to protect Trinity from him. And the 2 individuals, Paul Gui and Ralph Wong, they call it the Wong Gui flight from California. But I think what we did, we said to the church, I'm going to be available except for 5 to 7 every night. I'm going to be with my family, with my wife. Unless there's an emergency, I will be available. But here's the schedule, here's how this is going to work, but I'm going to be devoted to my family. And if that is something you criticize me for, you'll be the ones that will criticize me after my children go off the rail for not being a good father. So I said, just go ahead and criticize me now. I'll take the criticism up front. But it was an academic community. Everybody was very mature. I mean, they all laughed when I said that because they locked into this. So part of what happened is that the church protected us. My board protected me. That had already been negotiated. And a lot of pastors are not privileged to experience that. And so they're always trying to manage this. And if their own self-image is based on their performance at the church and they're getting more honor from the church and that's their mistress, that's a problem. But I think I had a healthy self-image and I just said, no, this is not where my identity is going to reside. I'm going to be faithful, I'm going to do the work, and I'm going to work hard. They called me to study the Bible 6 hours a day, 30 hours a week for the exposition because they wanted that kind of teaching, and they were all in on that, and then I counseled and so on and so forth. But then we hired staff, to compensate for my ineptness.
So basically boundaries and then creating systems around yourself.
Absolutely, absolutely. But having leaders support that. I think the philosophy was, we're not going to fight with each other on this. Let's be reasonable about it. And I'm not unreasonable. If you want me to change or do something differently, I will. And but if that clarity isn't there, there's going to probably be some real hurt. But I think each situation has to be evaluated because there are a lot of wives who are suffering because they feel neglected. They feel like the church is a priority, and that's not a wise move to make. If once that gets out among all the women in the church, I say to young guys, you do yourself a great favor if you commit to your wife and make her number one in your life, because the women will defend you.
Okay, so 50 years, what are some of the secrets or the principles that you would say has made this work, 50 years?
Well, I think that's part of the power of the love and respect message. I mean, Sarah and I have talked. I discovered that in Ephesians 5:33. We knew that, but we didn't focus in on it. But we've looked back and said, we basically, operated on that intuitively, instinctively. We talked early on, and she remembers when she would say things to me, and then my spirit would deflate. She didn't know why, but she knew that she had stepped on my air hose. And the same thing, I could when there were certain things if I did. There was this emotional rule. I mean, it was like, whoa. So we knew that there were vulnerabilities that we had, but we tried to trust the goodwill, and this was always a huge point. Because I look at my own mom and dad who had they didn't come to Christ until my freshman year at Wheaton. 2 years after I came to Christ, they're all watching. So my mom received Christ my freshman year. My sister prayed to receive Christ. She's 5 years older than me. My brother-in-law, who's a professor, prayed to receive Christ. And then my dad prayed to receive Christ. Within a matter of 9 months, my whole family came to Christ. But prior to that, I was sent to military school because of family issues. My dad had rage issues. They had been separated for 5 years when I was like, from age 1 to 7. They divorced when I was 1, but they remarried quite quickly after that. So there was this, chaos and trauma. And growing up, I never could figure out why they couldn't get along, because mom had goodwill, dad had goodwill.
Yeah.
What was it? In fact, my sister just this week sent me some love letters from 1941 and 1942, and my heart was so sad that they had such a just darling, honey, humorous, and I said to my sister, was it dad's rage? And we think it was dad's anger that really set it off, because most women are going to respond to love and humility. They are more of responders.
Yes.
Some say the essence of masculinity is initiation, the essence of femininity is response. And so my dad did not know how to do this dance. And I think mom just soured. And so I tried to study them, and Sarah tried to study her family. And I think we as young adults began to realize, well, this isn't what, we're not going to do this. My dad would go off into a rage, and I'm thinking, I'm just not going to do that. I'm just not going to do that. That's my issue, because I knew it was my dad's issue. He was blaming everything on, but I realized my dad was out of control, and he was blaming his lack of control. He was a good man. I never threw him under the bus, but in that area, he had a problem, and he confessed that to me after he came to Christ. He was very humble. He had a conversion that was second to none. He began to drive mom to Christian women's clubs. She was giving the testimony how both of them came to Christ. So dad's now taking her to these places. So they changed. But that didn't mean that he didn't have issues early on. And I look back on that, and I can think that we made decisions, Sarah and I did, that there are certain things we're not going to do. There are certain rules of engagement that are important to have, and not to violate those. And this saddens me when I see people think that they can just scream, yell, use the divorce word, I'm going to divorce you, and throw things, and somehow think that that isn't going to destroy the spirit of the other person. Yeah. So I think Sarah and I locked into the taboos. You follow what I'm saying? Yeah. That's for sure.
If you could go back in time, are there things you would do differently now?
Yeah.
If you could go back in time with all you know now. Other things you'd have done differently.
Yeah. That issue of regrets, and Sarah and I have talked about this. But I look back, and we really don't have, little things like David, my middle son, was very sanguine, very social. But at Wheaton, I heard so many kids that were turned off to the church because their parents would drag them up on the platform, to have them sing or give the testimony. They kind of forced that. And I heard all these students say they were turned off. So I made a decision that I wasn't going to expose my children like that. But I think I look back, I did different things. And I remember a couple times having David up there, and he relished that. He loved that. So I look back thinking, maybe I should have incorporated him more. You look back on things like that. Would that have caused him to feel more of a participant? But he's never said, no, Dad, you blew it there. But I think, it's a good question. We haven't really talked, Sarah and I, about that, but we have said we don't have major regrets. And one of the things we say to people, live your life in such a way that you don't have those regrets. My dad had regrets, and he told me those regrets. In fact, his mother was a godly woman. His dad died in 1918 in that flu epidemic, that first worldwide that we just went through in our pandemic. My grandfather, who I never knew, was 29, and he got the flu and died. And so my dad was 3 months old and never had a dad. And so he grows up with his mother, and they had a brother and sister and women. There was a holiness movement that they were part of. They were godly. They were prayer warriors. And after I came to Christ and I went in the ministry, I said to Dad, do you think the Spirit of Christ skipped over you because you stiff-armed the Lord and landed on me? Absolutely. I believe that the Lord was calling me, and I did not want to respond. Not until I came to Christ, and then he softened, But you look back and you see Dad with the regrets. Dad had regrets that he did not respond to Christ, for instance, and let Christ lead him. And then we came across these letters. There was a woman named Winnie Crouch, who was this godly woman and influenced my dad, and she was writing letters to my dad. I never saw them, and my nickname as a little boy was Eddie. She kept saying, "Have you told Eddie about Jesus? Have you told Eddie about Jesus?"
Wow.
All these letters, and my dad didn't say one thing to me about Jesus. Never said it, and he regretted that. Those are the kinds of regrets that, you see the pain in my dad. And I say to people, make sure that you're making decisions right now that there will be no regrets. Doesn't mean that you'll be perfect, but it's one thing to maybe discipline your children by putting them on timeout too long. It's another thing to throw a baseball bat at them. That's going to lead to regrets.
In all these years, you've been a pastor, you've been an author, you've held conferences on marriage, you've been a counselor. What would you say is one of the main causes of divorce? Because definitely not a lot of people make it to 50 years.
Yeah.
Right.
So what do you think are some of the reasons why people are not making it, lasting in marriage?
Right. No, it's an excellent question, and I think there are variables to that. But I think, as I say, when I met Sarah and we started dating, I didn't say to Sarah, Sarah, I hate you and you hate me, so let's get married.
Yeah.
It never goes down
That
that
way.
with anybody worldwide. So how is it that two people who are madly in love just
Yes.
become mad?
Yes.
How does that happen? And I take the position that in those early years, early months, it's honest misunderstanding. I mean, I think that there are evil people out there, so I can say there are exceptions to that. But in the
Major,
general
yes,
course of
definitely,
things,
yes.
I think there are these conflicts that ensue because of honest misunderstandings.
Yeah.
They don't know how to decode what the other person is saying,
True.
and they don't understand, and so they are offended. They feel devalued. Their interpretations of these experiences that tend to be interpreted negatively. That if you really cared about me, you wouldn't respond to me this way. And I've asked you to stop responding this way, and they don't. So now I have proof that the problem resides with my spouse because I humbly asked them to stop that, and they're not doing that. And so then we begin to resent them. And I believe that many of these responses that we want them to change often are rooted in our own goodwill. As we talked earlier in one of our sessions, most men will withdraw. 85% of those who withdraw during a tense marital conflict is the male because his heartbeats get to 99 beats per minute. He doesn't know that. He just instinctively knows this isn't going to go anywhere positive if I don't just shut down and distance myself at this point and we just drop it and forget it. But that puts every woman I've ever met in panic mode because Shawnee Feldhahn, a good friend and a researcher, says her research reveals that women live in this underlying fear that they're 3 conversations away from hearing their husband say, "I do not love you and I'm leaving you." And so there is this fluidity of insecurity, so she's going to move aggressively toward him for reassurance and to resolve this issue if they've really had a serious conflict. She panics because this is something that's unnerving to her. So she gets aggressive and chases him throughout the house, "Talk to me," when he's trying to drop it and forget it. She's motivated by goodwill, he's motivated by goodwill, but they totally misunderstand each other. And that would be a classic illustration. So my campaign is to help people realize, don't push eject on this relationship. You are normal. What you need is a little knowledge and a little skill, and you're going to be okay. And I'm going to give you that knowledge, and I'm going to give you that skill, and you'll be okay. Trust me.
I wanted to give advice to different categories of people, so we're going to be telling you. So the first person who wants you to give an advice to is you in your first year of marriage. You're talking to you 50 years ago. What would you tell yourself?
It's an interesting question. Well, I certainly, as I said earlier, the pre-murder syndrome and some of this fluidity of emotion and the reaction to me, and hopefully figuring this out sooner, that Sarah wasn't attacking me. She had a need, and she was reacting to me because she expected me to be able to resolve this with her, and she was expecting me to figure this out. And that she wasn't ill-willed. This was not an attack on me. It was actually a compliment to me because she had a need that only I could meet. And I was not tracking with that in those early. So I'd say to myself, this 25-year-old, hey, she needs you. This is not a complaint. This is a compliment. and sit and listen to her and seek to understand her and watch what happens.
I like that. This is not a complaint, it's a compliment. Yeah. I like that. You should remember that.
Yeah, okay. Advice, Dr. Sarah, 50 years ago.
The question again is?
Advice, Dr. Sarah.
50
She's just got married.
She just got married to you.
So when she's the first year, what advice I would give to her?
Yes.
Okay. Well, I wish you were here to be able to answer that. Because I was giving her a lot of advice that first year, and she wasn't listening to it then, so I don't know if she's going to listen to this. Yeah, that's a good question. No one's ever asked me that question. How would I assess that first year? And I have these scenes where we were living. She really was all in. I mean, she really was. I always felt Sarah was one of those cheerleaders, and I think that's why I married her, because I know she looked up to me. She was comfortable in her own skin. She wasn't selfish. There was a humility about her. She would react to me. That his sanguine personality could be reactionary, and that was not always pleasant. But I never, I don't know if I'd really change a whole lot, because she was sincere. I might tell her to tone it down once a month. Well, no, I know she would say she finally started calendaring, and she got in tune with that, and she's told other women this. Figure this out, because you're going to be, and what women say at that time is true. They've been so tolerant and so patient, so loving, but there comes that moment when they're just going to say, I've been sitting on this long enough, and I'm going to tell you, this family unit, what's going on here. That's not always true for all women, but Sarah has told women, get in tune with this so you can prepare for this moment a little bit better than suddenly it's like, everybody here, is, she said, I came to a point where, if everybody did it just my way, we'd be all happy. We'd all be happy. And she said, but none of us were happy because of some of those moments. But, I would not, I don't make that a big deal, because she's just as a servant. And that's what she's known. Her first impulse, and I have to tell her, don't serve everybody. Just let our grandson go get that for himself. Her first thing is to serve, because she enjoys it. Wow. So, that temperament was there early on, and I was the beneficiary of that.
Yeah. Okay, so advise an intending couple and a young couple. These people are either just about to start or just started marriage. Random couple, they're asking you for advice.
So they are married,
yes,
and they're newly married?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. I think it comes back to some of the things that we've done now 3 premarital things here in the last several months. And again, we have assessment tools. We have 180 questions, and it's a self-report thing. And that sometimes is helpful, because you're able to see quickly how they're filtering their relationship. So there's some unique things to every couple, and they need to address some of those issues, like how they're going to budget. This one family, they both have 10. They came out of families of 10. 10 in her family, 10 kids, and 10 in his, right? Yeah. But the one family had a little bit more resource, and the one, he didn't have as much resource. So she wanted to have 10 kids, and he wasn't. But see, her dad was financially secure, so they had a conflict there. And it wasn't because he didn't want to have a lot of kids. He was thinking, I'm responsible, and I don't think I can pull this off. So you need to talk about that. So wherever there are these conflicts that arise early in the relationship, there's something underneath there. And rather than seeing the other person as selfish, be very easy for you. Well, you don't love children. That was not the issue at all. And so in that case, I had them go a little bit deeper and unpack what's going on here. But I think the broader brushstroke to everybody is most of these conflicts probably are going to arise due to an honest misunderstanding. She looks at this thing through pink, he looks at it through blue. And if we take the position that because we're equal, therefore we're the same, that's what I call stupid. We are equal, but we're not the same. And that lack of sameness is okay. Iron sharpens iron, and God is going to use pink and blue to come up with purple solutions, the color of royalty, the color of God. And that this tension arises so that we'll come with a third option and find a better decision. But in the course of that first year, when these misunderstandings arise, trust the other's goodwill. You're going to have to sit down and talk about it. It's never comfortable, particularly if there's a tendency to point a finger, that if you hadn't said that, you wouldn't hurt my feelings. And this is a big one. Many women are saying, you hurt my feelings, you need to apologize. I say to men, that's going to be the message she sends to you. Instead of telling her to grow up, and she does in part, but it's better just to say, well, help me understand better how not to do that again. May be totally unfair to you, but you're an honorable man, and I'm going to tell you, you're going to be miles ahead if you engage her that way, because she'll be the first to say, well, I shouldn't overreact. Women become very apologetic on the heels of their own inadequacies. They don't try to defend themselves. If they feel understood, they'll be the first ones to say, oh, I need to do this differently too. And I say to the young guy, learn that quickly. Women don't want to be right. There are some women out there like that. She just wants to be reconciled and to be connected, and that everything's okay between you. Because if she says, I've proven that I'm right, but that he doesn't like me, that's very unnerving to her. So to be right and to feel that he doesn't like her, she's going to move still toward him to make sure everything's okay. So I don't know if that makes sense, but it comes back to that issue of just assume that the misunderstanding is an honest misunderstanding, and as a mature person, and you're becoming more mature, seek to find out why that honest misunderstanding is there. And I also tell people, most of the conflicts are over clashing preferences. It's not over an evil issue. It's not over an immoral issue. It is, should we spend the money for this, or should we save it to give it to Kingsley and Mildred in their church?
Yes.
Should we tithe or should we save, right? And so these are going to be honest differences of opinion, and they're going to be what I call the clashing preferences. But here's what happens in many relationships. If I know I'm right in giving the money to the church, let's say I'm the wife, and I said, we need to be tithing, and I know I'm right. Well, he's thinking we need to save for our retirement. Everybody's told me that we need to start putting money in and the compounding interest, and we need to take that money and put it there for our future when we get older. Okay, now, are either one of them wrong for their sentiment? No. I mean, one could be a better decision, but it doesn't mean that the other decision is a bad decision.
Exactly.
And this is where people make a problem. They pass judgment on the other's position as wrong, as though it's morally wrong, and that you're stupid for feeling that way. And I'm right, and I know I'm right, and you need to go along with. And what happens is they make, they create a marital conflict over here because they don't know how to word themselves correctly. So what I point out, if it's a gray area issue, you have honest difference of opinion. It doesn't mean that one decision isn't better. We know that there can be a better decision, but don't be dismissive of the other person's position as though it's morally wrong and they're stupid. Because once you do that, now you're going to really create tension in the relationship, and you're going to think that tension's there because they don't agree with you. No, it's because you're so dismissive of who they are as a human being. Does that make sense?
Absolutely, absolutely. Okay, advice to a couple at the brink of divorce. They're thinking about going their separate ways.
Well, given that it's not adultery, given that the person isn't run off with some other woman or some other man and they're in some other country now, there are biblical grounds for divorce. But most people, a lot of times you say, why are you both getting a divorce? You start unpacking it, they really don't know. Other than the fact that we don't get along and that we have, we're incompatible. And but no two people are compatible. And so now we're talking about the degree of incompatibility. But I think it comes back to me saying to these, well, let's put it this way. When Focus on the Family spent $50,000 studying the effects, long-term effects of love and respect, because 4 years Dr. Dobson sponsored us as their marriage conference, so they were pushing this across the country. And then we wanted to follow that up. And there were a ton of things we found out. But one of the things we found out is that there were people that actually attended who had divorced. We don't know why they came as two divorced people there, and there were people who were filing for divorce, right? And Jim Daly and I sat down. 60% of those who were almost 60 to 70% either got back together or called off the divorce. Because I take this position that I think you got derailed due to an honest misunderstanding, not ill will. We became ugly toward each other as these misunderstandings. We get really mean. I'm not talking about, you can take a snapshot and incriminate that person. I'm not going to justify some of these subsequent conflicts. But I believe those didn't start there. I believe you got derailed due to this honest misunderstanding. And I believe at the end of the day, gentlemen, she was feeling unloved. And then she perhaps threw things at you. But you said, I can't live with it. Well, come on, she's in panic mode because you mean more to her than anybody in the world. And this is, you misread the tea leaves here. And so too, he walked away from you because he didn't want to get into a fight with you, and he was just trying to do what he thought was honorable, and you then concluded with all your girlfriends, he's a mean, narcissistic, and you all filtered it through your own grid, which then groupthink sets in, because you all have the same experience. And it's not necessarily correct. It just means that it's similar. And so what I try to do is help people go back. And if you're willing to go back, and this is what I bring them to, if you're willing to go back and say, I wasn't trying to be disrespectful toward you. I know that that's how I came across, but I was needing something from you. And that was the cry of my heart. I know I lost it, but I was in panic mode, fearing that I was going to lose my right arm. Really? Yeah, Emerson was right.
Yes.
It's true. And then, but I wasn't trying to be unloving. He was right. I would die for you if you don't kill me first. I would die for you if you don't kill me first. But I can see now walking away, says he said I needed to come back after I was calmed down and talk. But I was now, I'm fine. We don't need to talk about it. And I was killing you. I didn't know that. And if they're willing to say, I'm sorry, will you forgive me for that? That's where that healing comes. So somebody on the edge of divorce, I say, you got to make sure here, because divorce is never a remedy to your problem. It's just going to compound your problem. And you're also going to have consequences on your children. You better know why you're getting a divorce. If you are a Christ follower, you also need to know, is this biblical grounds for divorce? Or is you just have concluded, I can't live with this person? And is it their problem, or you just don't have a little knowledge and a little skill to know how to navigate some of these conflicts that are normal for everybody? It's ignorance and lack of skill. It's not their problem as much as it is yours. And I don't want to put the blame on you, because they have to hear me as well. But I'm saying you have far more influence here than you probably think. You've just given up prematurely due to ignorance.
Oh, okay. That's powerful.
Not stupidity. Some people think ignorance means stupidity. Ignorance means you don't know. Stupidity means you do know. You do the opposite in spite of what you know.
Wow. Okay. Advice to us.
Oh, really? I didn't see that coming.
Well, no, I don't. I mean, you guys are. I applaud what you're doing. I think you are very principle-driven. You are very attuned to the issues. You are on top of this. I think the key is the key is to do a marathon, not the sprints. You've been in 22 cities. You're both exhausted. Your family's been separated. So again, it's a matter. I said to Sarah through the years, we plod. We pace ourselves. When we say yes to everything, we're saying no to something else. And it's important to make sure that you see this long term. And God told me not to write anything until I was 50. So at age 25, I waited 25 years. I don't tell other people that that's what they ought to do. That's not my message to you. But I just felt like I wasn't necessary. Jesus Christ doesn't need me. And he can do in a nanosecond what might take me 10 years to try to do. So it's a faith venture. And I just encourage people, particularly initiating people who are aggressive. And then every Nigerian is diligent, hardworking, initiating. I mean, you, as a culture, you're incredible.
Yes.
But that's why people who are very capable, and I would put myself in that category, but if I pushed it too hard, I lost my peace. I got out over my skis, and I became anxious because I felt like I'd back off and said, Lord, you know. I mean, in high school, I was voted most likely to succeed. Then I went to Wheaton. I was voted freshman class president. So here I'm this really aggressive kid. I was number 2 in overseeing the cadet corps of 300 students. All these awards. But when I came to Christ, me functioning in that mode would lead to success, but it would lead to probably 3 divorces and a lot of anger and a lot of whatever. I mean, who knows where. And I just said, Lord, you don't need me. I'm an initiator. So here's the deal for me, Lord. You take the initiative with me and I'll respond to you. You're masculine, I'm feminine. You take the initiative, I'll respond to you. I'm the church. And I feel comfortable with that. And I don't promote that for everybody. I just simply say that's what I learned. And I think in the case of you, the enemy of the best is the good. The enemy of the best is not evil. And so you're going to have more and more opportunity. And so I would just say, pace yourself, and just keep your peace. Keep the peace of Christ. Let the peace of Christ dwell in your hearts. But we haven't talked about that, so I'm not sending some message. I'm just saying, based on 22 cities and now here, You both have fallen asleep on me 4 times in this.
No.
I'm joking. I'm just kidding. Just kidding. Just kidding.
That's good. That's good. Yeah, because she works too hard.
Wow.
All right.
I have one last question. Do you think that if you were both not Christians, you would have made it to 50 years?
No. I mean, and I think that's a very important point, because Sarah and I, there were a number of dynamics, one of which, and I referenced earlier, like that night when the kids were all teenagers, just turning these things over to Christ. And such a comfort, knowing that the Lord is listening to us. If we're humble, we really need His wisdom. If anybody lacks wisdom, let him ask of God, who gives to all men generously and without reproach. And I've always loved that, without reproach, because a lot of times we come thinking, the Lord should slap us. Why didn't you come earlier? But He doesn't reproach us for not coming earlier, and He gives generously. And I found real delight in that. And that's kind of Sarah and I. Our posture was, we need the Lord. And Sarah's had breast cancer and could have died, but she had developed in her life thanksgiving, the giving of thanks, based on 1 Thessalonians 5:18. And even when she possibly was going to die, David said, how are you processing this, Mom? I've given thanks all my life, and I'm thankful now, whatever the result's going to be. So I think Sarah had that spirit of giving thanks, a sacrifice of praise, so that on the heels of frustrations, difficulties, she would give thanks, always praising, always giving thanks. And I tried to introduce this. But yeah, I thought if we weren't Christians, if we hadn't known the Lord, what's the purpose of all of this? Yeah. Because marriage is going to have normal conflicts. And people have this Hollywood view, not the Holy Word view of relationships. And as a result of that, they have unrealistic expectations. And then they don't know how to compare. I spoke recently at 500 people at this kind of marriage dinner, and I said, some of you were in the park today, and you saw this middle-aged couple, same age as you. They're just holding each other, kissing each other, caressing, walking on the path, and you sat there and you envied them. But let me tell you about that couple. They both have been married 3 times. They're in an affair right now, and the kids are crying at home because Mom and Dad have left them again. And everybody broke out in laughter and said, that's probably true. Because how many old age people have been married for 20, 30 years, they're in the park all over each other like that. So it's not that you can't be that way, because every woman longs for that kind of affection. And so I'm always guarded, because it's kind of like, are we saying then just be happy with being unhappy? No. But we are talking about the fact that we compare ourselves to the wrong set of people. What we need to do is get with that godly, wise couple who've been married 30 years and ask them. They've got a great relationship. How did they come to having a great relationship? Those are the people we need to compare ourselves to. And I think that's becoming a real sad thing with all the social media. We think everybody out there is happy and has this wonderful relationship. Yeah. But I've been with people on the front side of that camera work, and I've been with them on the back side of that camera work. And they're yelling at each other. Even Joy, my daughter, who's always on, she's got this newlyweds in Paris, and so she's got all these people following her all over the world. But she'll come out and say that Matt and she had this horrible fight, because I say we can't project a false image, otherwise we're misleading people, and the very people we're wanting to serve, we're creating an appetite in them that's inappropriate, that they now have an expectation, and now they resent their spouse that they're not experiencing in Paris what Matt and Joy are experiencing there.
So was there, in these 50 years, was there any time you or Dr. Sarah felt like we're done
with each other?
Yes, that we're done with this marriage.
No. I mean, I think we had those moments of. I think the greatest pain is, like, I've been working on this. This would be a more recent illustration. I've been working on the win-win marriage. And Sarah, this is a big series that I'm doing. I'm very excited about it, and we can teach all this kind of stuff. And then we have a conflict. This win-win stuff doesn't even work. I said, man, talk about a crushing blow. I mean, come on. And I said, well, I don't mean it that way. I said, well, it's kind of like saying I'm a hypocrite. I'm a big hypocrite. No, you're not a hypocrite. But I said, well, it certainly sounded to me like that. So we'll have exchanges like that. And but I say to people, just clarify, seek clarification. What did you mean by what you just said? How am I supposed to filter that? Are you saying that I'm this hypocrite, and if anybody really knew who I was, they wouldn't listen to anything I had to say? No, I'm not saying that. Well, it certainly sounded like that to me. And it doesn't mean that there isn't a lack of truth in that. I mean, nobody's perfect, and we're all going to have bad hair days. And as I say, you can incriminate anybody, because no one's going to do this thing perfectly. But in any event, that would be the worst that it's gotten. And I think we're concerned now as we get older, one of us is going to probably move into ill health. Will we lose our mind? Every night I pray, Lord, grant to us health, sound minds, and grant to us those sound minds, and strength, grant to us strength, but particularly sound minds because of the dementia realities and the sadness so many are experiencing now with lack of quality of life, and the longevity of life now is greater, but the quality of life is decreasing due to these mental challenges. And there's a lot of despair out there as people age. And so I think part of the challenge is to prepare for those last days.
People say there are seasons in marriage, so 50 years is a long time. Would you say things have changed, and what has changed from when you were a couple without kids and now you're a couple with grandkids?
Yeah, that's a new season.
What has changed?
For us, or
Being
just the culture?
grandparents.
For you, for both of you, for the marriage?
Yeah, I think the sobriety of our limitations. I think when you're 20, you're going to live for 50 years, kind of a thing, and now you realize, at our age, we realize that's not going to continue. You still think I've got another good 20 years in me. I really do believe that, and I've been pacing myself for that, staying healthy, eating well. We both eat. We've always been mindful of the long run, and that's been in our mind. But I think we're now wondering, how are we going to die? And just, I heard of a husband and wife married 67 years. And his wife dies, and he said 67 is too short. But within months, he was dead. The broken heart, the death of a broken heart. We had a woman I met yesterday who was saying her mom lived for a long time, and she died, and we all knew his brothers and sisters, dad will be dead. And he was within several months. The loneliness issue. And we don't, I think a real challenge, the longer you live, you realize how much you value the other person, but you don't tell them that you value them until they're gone. And the power of that relationship is there far more than people can even begin to imagine. And even the 67 years of marriage, some of the siblings were saying, but Dad got annoyed with Mom probably more than he should, but he was dead within months after she died. And and he was in despair. I miss this woman. It was kind of like, well, Dad, why didn't you tell her a little bit more?
Okay, so culturally speaking, is marriage different today than it used to be then, culturally speaking, how people see it?
Yes. In fact, I just watched an interview with Peter Hitchens, who was Christopher Hitchens' brother. Christopher Hitchens, the great atheist, who wrote, God is not great, and he's now dead, but his brother is an evangelical believer. And Peter Hitchens made a comment out of nowhere. They were talking about atheism and some of these things, but he said, what's really done the damage to the culture is not atheism. It was in the 1960s in this country when there was no-fault divorce. We then implemented legally no-fault divorce. Nobody's to blame. And he said that's what's contributed to the collapse of relationships, collapse of family. And I thought, wow, that came out of nowhere. And I've been thinking about it ever since he said that. And I'm one who went through that in the 60s and 70s with no-fault divorce. So I think from a cultural standpoint, when our culture in the West said nobody's to blame, and you can divorce for any reason, whatever, and divorce lawyers came up with the fact that we're incompatible. It's called the myth of incompatibility. Nobody's compatible. It was designed by divorce lawyers to justify they're not compatible. Brad Pitt's and his, we're incompatible. I mean, it's just, nobody's compatible. You learn to be compatible. But I think the excuse making, and you know how to define rationalize, don't you? Rational lies. And as a culture, we've rationalized. We've come up with these rational lies why we're not going to be committed to this relationship. And I think the Judeo-Christian worldview says I just did a wedding last Saturday, where you make the vows, for better, for worse, for richer, for poorer, in sickness and in health, until death do us part. And I said, you have symbols of these solemn vows you have both taken, of the ring. And the ring makes all the difference. There's a book written on that this commitment. But people have this idea we're going to live together to test this out. But that's like a football team saying, you know what, we're probably going to get beat on Saturday, so let's not work out this week, and now we played the game and we got beat, and then they say, good thing we didn't work out hard. You know, it's the commitment up front that enables you to figure out how to do marriage. But when we have a culture that says don't commit because you might get hurt, you're just, it's self-fulfilling prophecy. And so I say to young people and even older people, the vow, that holy vow you made, is there's a reason for that. And that reason is this will result in your happiness. If that commitment is there and you learn a little bit more knowledge, a little bit more skill, you'll actually enjoy this relationship. Yes. You'll be friends. And when you're both aged, you won't die in despair because you've been divorced 3 times and your kids can't stand you. And I say to people, many of you are going to be in a retirement center in our America, and you're going to have to be drugged because you're so depressed and you're so alone. Yeah. Do you realize what's coming? You visit these places and you will see what's coming. The bad choices of people who have ruptured relationships. And I've had so many people say to me after our conference, this is their 3rd marriage, I'll say at the book signing, I should have never left my first wife. Wow. I should have never left her. I was a fool. Wow. He whispers because he doesn't want the 3rd. But she would agree. She's saying to Sarah, I shouldn't have divorced my husband. Oh. See, it's ignorance. It's not the fact that you married a horrible, rotten person. Because I happen to believe that we're pretty discerning. Mm-hmm. We can figure out this person. And they are the person that you should remain committed to. This is the person that God has for you. And so don't throw in the towel. But now in the culture we just see, and this is interesting. Do you know that among the Gen Zs, they live together, right? Because the view is it's more sacred to live together than to get married, because if you get married as a young person, they actually get nauseous at that thought. That is not sacred. That is looked at as very foolish, idiotic. It's more sacred to live together than to commit to marriage. So what used to be sacred, marriage, is now viewed as unsacred, and what is sacred is living together. But as I always say, the plumbing always works. So what are you proving? And particularly we know from research, if you're sexually intimate, you have a tendency to favor that person, and you don't resolve the conflicts, and you have make-up sex, and you never deal with the issues. And then if you're not committed, and particularly the guys are thinking, why should I buy the cow if I get the milk for free? Yeah. That's an expression in our culture.
Yes,
I don't know if
yes,
Nigerian. Yeah. I don't want to end on a negative note, but I think there's a sober message here that those who are in a relationship and are second guessing it don't. Just recommit to those principles that God has revealed and trust the Lord that He knows what He's talking about here.
So I was going to ask, because you talked about the vows, there's this new thing where this generation don't want the traditional vows at their wedding. They feel like you saying for better, for worse, for richer, for poorer, is you speaking negativity into your future.
Yes, you're expecting the worst.
You're expecting the worst. You're declaring that there will be a worst. I don't know if you know that that's a thing now. What's your take on that?
Well, I think the question is, we're going to be persecuted. There's a promise in Scripture: all who live godly in Christ Jesus will be persecuted. You know, many people they take the promise of Scripture. I did a conference in Canada, and a woman came to me who helped facilitate the conference. She brought us in, but she now said, I'm bitter toward the Lord. I said, why? The last 6 months, my daughter, my only daughter, had her first child, our grandchild, and it died several hours after birth, and I'm resentful toward God. I had all these promises that I was praying over. I said, were all those promises in Scripture positive? Yes. That God was going to do something on behalf of your faith? Yes. Did you have all who live in godly in Christ Jesus will be persecuted? No, I didn't put that in. Do you realize how many promises in Scripture there are that also reveal to us some difficulties? And we have to have a balanced perspective here. And just because we realistically look at some of these statements that Jesus made, if you follow me, they hated me, they're going to hate you. And so is that somehow self-fulfilling prophecy because we believe the word of Christ? I think it's a wise perspective. It doesn't mean that because there's the potential for difficulties, that potential now is going to come to pass because I somehow acknowledge that potential. That would be what I would call foolish thinking. Instead, it's a commitment to that person that if you have cancer or if something happens to you, I'm all in with you. and I'm not going to leave you. I'm here for you. Job and Job's wife. And I think, but then the question is, well, if I'm saying, if you get cancer, I'm going to be by your bedside, is that self-fulfilling prophecy? I would never, then that's saying that we have to have this view that we live in Eden. That we have a perfect world, and if you acknowledge that we live in a fallen world, then you're going to experience fallenness. And I say, we've got to think biblically here. Eden will be revisited on the other side. Paradise will be resumed on the other side, a new earth. But right now we're in a fallen world. So bad that Jesus Christ came and was brutally treated, and all the sin of the world was placed on him because there's a problem here. And to acknowledge that doesn't mean that I'm now giving in to that happening in my life. I think that is the subscribing to what we call the power of positive thinking. And there is a place for positive thinking. I'm all in on that. But you don't want to push that too far, because then you become unrealistic and you're not prepared to deal with suffering. And just like I had a couple come to me for we would have child dedication, right? And something in my spirit, as this husband and wife were there they were going to dedicate their baby. Something prompted me to ask them why. Why do you want to dedicate your child? Well, we expect God to protect our child. I said, well, what do you mean by that? That God has an obligation to prevent your child from getting into drugs or doing any kind of evil, that this is kind of a ritual that you're going through, that God now is bound to prevent any problems? They said yes. They actually said yes to this. I said, whoa. Our child dedication is you're really dedicating yourself to bring your child up in the way of Jesus Christ, that you're going to be a Christ follower whether or not your child chooses Jesus Christ or not. When we talk about baby dedication, we're actually calling parent dedication. Yeah. You're dedicating yourself to being the kind of person that God calls you to be, regardless of how your child turns out. And they said, well, if that's the case, we're not going to do this. So there is this foolish thinking out there sometimes that God has an obligation to do something, we have an obligation to think a certain way, that we're trying to control. And my thinking is, we need to be a little guarded there, because I want my wife to know that in the event that something happens, that vow is there, that I'm all in, no matter what.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
I agree.
Okay, as we're going to round up, what are one or two or three things Dr. Sarah has mentioned that she likes about you?
I told her several things about me, but whether or not she adheres to it. I think she would say, because she said this to me, I mean, obviously she sees me as, she would say that I've been a faithful plodder, that, you just plod. She would see me as walking in humility, which I'm very proud of. Very proud of being so humble. But I mean, I think that idea that I'm not necessary, that's really deep in the Lord doesn't need me. I want to be used of Him, but He doesn't need me. So I think she would say some of these things that I've articulated. She's been very affirming of that, very supportive of that. She appreciates the fact that I've always tried to be available to her. Early in the marriage, I gave her 15 minutes every night after dinner, just to let her share what her day was like. The kids were pounding on the door, wanting it, but no, this is my time with my girlfriend. You're going to grow, you're going to be older, and you're going to be out of the home, and she and I are going to party when you leave, kind of thing. But that period of time, giving her that 15 minutes, really honored her. Really, she looks back on that and is so grateful for that. We try to pray 15 minutes now every day. We're not legalistic on that, but we call each other, let's just spend 15 minutes praying about various things. So I think she likes the fact that I'm looking to Christ, trying to, and I'm a plodder, and some of the vision that I had early in life has come to pass. So she's confident that some of these things that I instinctively sensed have been proven to be true, and so she's excited about the future because we have a new vision. So I don't know if that's answering the question, but those would be some immediate thoughts.
Okay. Yes. So apart from her being her authentic self, what else do you like about her?
What else do I like about her? Yeah. She's hot.
She is.
Yeah, she is, though.
She
is, for real.
My woman. Yeah, and I think, I appreciate the fact that, we have enjoyed each other. I mean, we've tried to be healthy and tried to be, there for each other to meet those wide range of needs. And, I think she's never been selfish. She's always responsive and she's always transparent. and she'll own up more for on her side of the problem and say, no, neither one of us are wrong in this. I mean, she has a tendency to blame herself more. I said, no, this is not to be framed that way. Neither one of us are wrong on this issue. It's just a matter of an honest difference of opinion. And so I try to coach along that line, because I think she will default to maybe taking more ownership than she should, which is a rare trait in some cases today.
Yeah.
Yeah. You didn't mention that she was a good cook. I have like 150 things that she's good at, but you didn't mention she was a good cook.
She's marvelous.
Yes.
She's marvelous at it. In fact, at night, Instagram, she lays in bed, she's going through these women out there that are talking about recipes, and she just has a joy in that, and she just loves doing that. And it's interesting, even last night, she'd been busy doing a lot of stuff, and I said, well, let's just go out and get something. I'll go get something, bring it here. And I can almost predict 80% of the time. She said, I'm thinking about, we need to get something tonight. Let's go out and let me go get something or something. But I can predict 80% of the time she'll turn around and fix something.
Yeah.
And she did it again last night. I said, I was ready to go get something. Yeah. No, and then she's, I found something I'm going to fix.
And we're a testament to that. When we had dinner with you guys, she's such a wonderful cook.
Yes, yes.
Okay, so I have like 2 more questions. Do you remember your wedding day, and what was memorable?
Well, are you talking about that evening?
No, we have minors watching, so we're talking about the whole day. The wedding day. What was?
Well, it was 1973, September 3rd, that you well know, and it was in Indiana, hot, no air conditioning in the church. And I mean, the memories that Sarah has in particular, we were sweating, everybody was hot. I think we had like 8 on my side, 8 on her side. I gave a little sermonette. I had a pastor, the chaplain Wheaton was there. I had another pastor there. I mean, it was long. It was like 90 minutes. Everybody was sweating. So we kind of look back and chuckle at all the difficulties there. I do remember quoting, because we were in Lebanon. It was Lebanon, Indiana. Indiana,
okay.
Right? So I said, come with me, my bride from Lebanon.
Oh,
so we went from Lebanon to Peoria. Come with me. I was the only guy that probably in the United States was ever able to quote that. Come with me, my bride from Lebanon. And so that was always a humorous point. But no, I think we were just so excited to get married. I mean, we were, there is that pent up, element there. And we feel badly for so many people who don't have that sense of anticipation, because they've been living together,
yes.
And it's just not. I don't think it's not honor. It's fornication, and there's a discipline, and people don't realize there's a consequence if you're a Christ follower disobeying. The Lord doesn't turn a blind eye to that. There will be a loving, holy, at least for you, but there will be a loving discipline for that. But on the other side of it, there's a real joy. And so that was certainly, we look back and chuckle at that. But I think the overall day, we were just excited and just, but we were part of that tradition where you had the juice down in the church, basement. I mean, we're still part of not the big rah-rah with all this money being spent. It was 1973, but we need to reminisce a little bit more. One of the guys that was a great pianist at Wheaton, just a very gifted, he wrote all the music to our wedding, the whole score, and it's powerful, just powerful. So we have a lot of fond memories about that, and so thank you for asking.
Yeah. What was the color of your suit?
I'm sorry?
What was the color of your suit?
Black, and she was white, of course, but her wedding party had kind of a off-rose color, burgundy rose. I don't know. It's kind of like colors, all the names of these colors. Red.
Just
basically a light red. Yeah.
So did you do bow tie or a normal tie?
That's a good question. I think we had bow ties. We had cummerbunds. I don't think I had a tie. I think we had the bow ties, and cummerbunds.
Okay. If you allow us, we would like to show you pictures when we're doing this video, so that people could see what a wedding in 1973 looks like.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah. No, that was a hot Indiana day, humid. Wow. But But thank you so much for the interview.
Yes. So, where did you do the honeymoon?
We went from Lebanon, Indiana, 3 hours to Peoria, where my parents lived, and there was a place called Jumer's at that time. It's no longer a hotel, but Jumer's. It was a high-end kind of a place, and we stayed there that first night, and it was just, we have memories of that. And then my mom and dad left, and so we stayed at our house. We had a pool, and it was up on a hill, and so we just had a wonderful week there, and had friends out, and it was just a relaxing, peaceful time. Just a lot of fond memories.
Wow. Okay, so you did this is my last question. You did the 50th year anniversary a few months ago. What did you do?
Well, interestingly, Sarah tried to surprise me. I came to Christ through Billy Graham, and Billy lived in 2 homes in the Montreat area. The first home was like 1946 to 1954, and then he moved to the Montreat place that we kind of all know. But before he was well known, actually he was living in this first home, with the LA Crusade that put him on the world map. That house became available to, it was for sale because Ruth Graham, the daughter, needed money for her daughter who had medical problems. And when it came up, I was going to buy it. I was going to actually buy it because I thought, wow, I'll buy that. But some businessmen bought it, Kirk Cameron and another businessman out of Charlotte, and they made it available to pastors who are under stress to go there with their spouse, and you have kind of an R&R. Well, Sarah wanted to surprise me, so she contacted us. Well, we're not under stress, we're not in trauma, but here's the backstory. He came to Christ, we were going to buy this place, it's our 50th anniversary, and they were so excited because they knew love and respect, and said, hey, have it for a week, it's yours, our gift to you. So we went to Montreat outside of Asheville and stayed there at Billy Graham's home, and I made a whole bunch of videos how I came to Christ. I sat in the very rocking chair that he would sit in, the very study that he studied in, probably for some of the sermons for that LA Crusade. And I made a whole series of videos on how I came to Christ through Billy, how my mom came to Christ through me, how my sister came to Christ, my brother-in-law, my father, and how our whole family found Christ that freshman year. And so it was a very meaningful time, and we just had a wonderful time reminiscing about Billy. We listened to Greg Laurie wrote a book on Billy Graham because he was good friends with him, and we listened to the audios. We walked around that area, but overnight he became a phenomenon, and tour buses would come and line up on the side of that house, and they could see through the window. So Billy talked about the fact that he had to crawl on the floor to go from room to room because everybody was trying to get a picture of him. And finally in 1954, late at night while he was gone, Ruth was in the bedroom, and some man was peering through the window in the bedroom, and she said, that's it, because people were coming from all over the world, because this man was world-renowned. I mean, for 60 years he was known as one of the most well-known figures on the planet, and but it all started there, and it was really a special time for us to be there.
Wow. We're so honored.
Yes, we're so grateful, and learned a lot today.
We learned a lot today.
A lot.
Thank you.
Thank
You're
you,
welcome.
sir.
Thank you.
Thank you for being an example.
Yeah.
Because I'm sure, just like you mentioned, the lady in New York that had never seen a couple married for,
30
you know,
years.
I feel with the way things are looking, you know, people like you will be, you know, looked up to as people that have stayed the course, you know, in marriage. So thank you for staying the course, for doing it right, you know, and for being an example.
And for being able to articulate what you do right so that we can learn from it. I think that for me is the most important thing. That not only that you know what you've done, but you can teach it.
Yeah.
Well, but you both are doing the same thing. You're doing the same thing. I mean, principalizing and trying to think through what's going on here, and is there a principle here, and getting excited about learning, and why continue to subject yourself to pain if you can do it differently?
Yes.
And that's where my mom and dad missed it, and that's why we got to do it differently. A lot of times before I go out and speak, I'm thinking, my mom and dad are sitting there, they have a little boy like me, and I want to be able to say things in such a way that they can experience healing, because I wish that would have happened to my mom and dad, and it never did.
Yeah.
You're helping so many more people.
Yeah.
So it kind of did.
Yes. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
And I love to Dr.
Sarah.
We missed her here.
Yes.
Yeah, and the one more thing I love about the two of you, your sense of humor, your wit, the banter back and forth is just beautiful to watch. Beautiful. And I don't know if it is, but I think it's one of the secrets you guys may have.
Well, there's
the
truth
fact
to
that
that.
you enjoy a good laugh together.
Yeah.
And
Well,
you find
that's a very good point, because you don't want the other person to. It's not laughter at the other person's expense.
Yeah.
It's laughter at your own expense, 90% of the time, unless something is just silly and we're all laughing at something. Like Sarah always trips. She's always tripping, and so we start laughing at that. She just, but I mean, you got to lighten up. Well, one of the things we say is, lighten up. You're going to die.
Right?
You're not getting enough hair life.
Yes.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
All right.
Thank you, sir. Hey, guys, this was amazing. Dr. Emerson, 50 years in marriage, and such an honor. Such an honor. I don't know if you want to pray
Sure.
for couples out there that are maybe just gotten married or are married, that they would last this long and
Yes.
be this fulfilling,
Yes.
and even last longer than this.
Yes. Father, we pray for that couple that may be entertaining divorce that we've addressed, that they would revisit what's going on, and that you would remind them that many of these things are honest misunderstandings early on, and that some bad things have happened subsequent, but it didn't start there. And I pray that they would be reminded that a little knowledge and a little skill can go a long way, and that they would revisit some of these things that we expressed earlier. I pray for that couple midlife who they're just tired because they're responsible for their children, they're responsible for their aging parents. It's just responsibility everywhere, and they're tired. And I pray that they'd realize the uniqueness of that season, and that this will pass, and they can get through this without having to end the relationship as though somehow it's a waste of time to maintain this relationship. And I pray they too would be reminded that there are honest misunderstandings, that they would remind each other that they have goodwill. And I pray for that couple, newlyweds. No doubt they are excited, but some perhaps are thinking, whoa, this is more conflicted than I thought. Maybe I made a mistake. May they be reminded that there is no mistake here. These are normal issues, and that they can wade through these things, and not to panic, but to actually get excited about learning about this other person, not just teaching this other person about themselves, but learning about the other person. And I pray that you'd help them. And that person who's single, wondering if they'll ever find someone, and whether they will be married, I pray that they would realize that you, if you haven't given them a gift of celibacy, then you have called them to marriage. And I pray that they would make a decision to be the right type of person, rather than trying to find the right person. And that they would be the mature person, and eventually that mature person will come across their path. May they focus in on being that right person. So we lift these things up and these people to you through Jesus Christ. Thanking you again for Kingsley and Mildred and their commitment to this dear audience. Continue to use them on their behalf. Through Christ we pray.
Amen.
Amen.
Amen. Amen. Thank you, sir.
Thanks, sir.
Thank you,
Thank you,
sir.
sir.
See you guys in the next video.